So we did the demo last year, and we learned a number of things from that demo. The machine itself has an operator basket that's elevated about 18 feet in the air, and we wanted an easy way to get into that so the operators could get up and down, whether the basket was up or in the down position. We've redesigned the engine cover and the access to the operator station. I'll show you what that looks like. We realized too that the MAV was a little bit too wide. When we were running twine last year, knotting the twine to the trellis cable, we saw that the operator basket was just a little bit, about 6 inches too wide, and we were hanging up a little bit on the twine when we were staking by hand. We could see that that was going to be an interference. We also noticed that the twine basket was a little bit too wide. We designed the system to be 11 feet wide, and obviously row to row spacing is about 12 feet on some of the smaller plantings. We thought 6 inches on each side would be fine, but we realized that 6 inches when you've been running the machine all day, it starts to get a little hard to make sure that you're not clipping the poles as you're going down. We noticed that mounting the knotters up on the operator basket, which is where they were originally located, was a little bit difficult to put them into place and to hold them there. And then it was also a little difficult to, because you're on a long lever arm there, and the knotter heads themselves are a little bit heavy. We noticed that we were getting a little bit of too much wobble in the operator basket, which obviously affected the knotters themselves. The other thing we saw was that the steering radius was a little bit longer than we wanted, and there was an easy solution to that. And then, of course, the biggest thing that we found were that the trellis cables weren't uniform going down the row. That is, they kind of snake as they go down the row. Now, previously, people have worked on keeping them straight or actually moving them into position. We thought we could probably do that, but we decided that it was easier to simply track those trellis cables and move the heads to the cables. So I'll show you how we did that. So here's what we've done for the, these are all drawings because all these are in, the parts are on order right now. We're waiting to receive a lot of these. This is the engine cover. And what we wanted to do to get up into the operator basket is simply put a little ladder on the back. And you can see here, there's a little handle. All you have to do is grab that handle, pull down the handle. You can lower the ladder down to the ground, climb up the ladder, cross the engine cover, and then up the walkway up to the operator basket. It's a fairly straightforward, easy way to get up. Once you're up there, you just turn around, step on this little lever up here, lift the ladder up into place. The ladder drops in. It's a lot like your extension ladders at home, so very simple. Like I mentioned, the operator basket was a little bit too wide. Now, we built the basket wide so that we could use the unit not only as basically a hop stringer, but also as an elevated work platform. So we wanted it wide enough that 3, adult large males could work in the basket without any real issue. But when we realized it was a little too wide, one of the engineers came up with the idea of, hey, why not just put, wings onto the unit so that you can basically pin these wings into place to increase the width of the operator basket. But during things like stringing, top cutting, things like that, you simply don't need those wings on there. So narrow it up when you need it narrow, and put the wings on when you want to use it for the elevated platform work. So you can see here on the left is the basket when it's in the narrow position or narrowed, and on the right you can see we've added these little wings. They go into little slots there, telescoping steel tubing. They'll support plenty of weight, and you can just put those on when you want to use it for elevated platform work and take them off when you don't. The other suggestion from one of the growers was that we put on basically a guard. Apparently one or several people running these during either twining or top cutting have been moving along and gotten caught by the cross cables, the support cables. And so they wanted to make sure that no one could get basically clotheslined by a cable. So we simply put these little the deflectors on there to prevent anybody from getting clipped with a cable. Top cutters haven't changed at all. They worked really well when we tested them last year. The only thing we added to them was, since the trellis cables themselves kind of snake down the rows, we added hydraulics onto these so that the operator can move these independently. You can move them in and out along the guide rails, so that you can always keep them moving underneath or directly underneath the trellis cables. So you don't have to worry about moving the cables to the units. You simply move the units, the cutting units, or the knotters, as far as that goes, to the cables. And then we talked a lot last year about whether or not we really needed to be able to compact the hops when they drop into the back of the truck. And it was decided that, yeah, that is necessary. So we went ahead and incorporated this compactor here. So in the stowed position, it sits all the way up and kind of acts as a barrier for anybody to move out of that area there. And then, of course, we can compact this way by moving it down. And you could move this entire operator basket down to help compact the hops as well. Like I mentioned, we narrowed the twine basket up. We removed about 6 inches of it. So now the twine basket is the same width, basically, as the engine itself on the unit and the tires. So we saved about 6 inches on each side. That gives a foot of clearance between the poles when the unit is directly between poles on a 12-foot spacing. It didn't do a whole lot to the amount of twine we can hold. We can still hold enough twine for about 14 acres. The unit itself is going to twine about 6 acres a day over a 6-week period, 7 days a week, so 42 days, 250 acres. So there's plenty of twine on there. You should only have to put twine on about every other day. So it didn't have a lot of effect on the twine. It reduced it slightly, but not enough really to worry about. Now, I mentioned before that we moved the knotter mounts from basically the operator basket, which is up above. It could be as much as 18 feet in the air, down to the chassis. We did that for a couple of reasons. Like I mentioned before, one of the reasons we did it was because it was just very difficult to mount the units up on that basket, because even in the down position, it's kind of high, and the knotter heads are heavy. They're industrial, and so it was a little bit difficult for people to do that. And then the other issue was because it was on a long lever arm, we got some bounce up there, and there's a lot of weight with 2 knotter heads up there. And so instead of putting the weight up high, we decided to put the weight down low and basically mount it directly to the chassis. You can see that here, the whole mount just drops on to the chassis, bolts into place. Should be pretty easy to put on and take off. I think in the next slide, so here it is, the knotters are stowed for travel. They simply sit in that position if you need to go from field to field or down the road. And then, of course, they sit up in the upright position when you're in the field knotting. So one thing we also found was that when the operator is working in this, basically knotting, tying, and twining a field, the operator, because the trellis cables kind of snake down the field, and it'd be very difficult to align them perfectly. And the fact that the operator is would have to be watching, the knotter on the left, the knotter on the right, the staker on the left, the staker on the right, and making sure that the unit is driving down the center of the row. We decided that we wanted to remove as much of that from the operator's view as possible. That is, we didn't want the operator to have to be distracted by too many things while he or she was running the machine. So we decided to put in some automatic trellis tracking. And it's really quite simple what the engineers came up with, which we had this we call it a star aligner here, which was really just to keep the unit tracked so you can see it easily along the trellis cable. So the trellis cable runs down the center of this star aligner, and then through a guide here, and then the knotter is in the knotting position right now. So in this little slot right here. So the trellis cable sitting on this will create force on this star aligner. And we put sensors in here so we can sense whether or not the star aligner is in contact with the cable. So in the vertical position. So if we're too high, it'll push this star aligner down. Where'd my cursor go? There it is. Oops. lost my cursor here. Anyway, it'll push the star liner down if we're too high, and the star liner will move up if we're not high enough. Think of this kind of as a joystick, right? So if you've ever used a joystick, you know that as soon as you let go of the joystick, it centers itself. Well, this is kind of just the opposite of that. So what we're always trying to do is keep this star aligner perfectly centered on the machine. So what we're going to have is down below on this, the mounting mechanism, we have 3 cylinders that'll always do that. So here's the cylinder that'll move the nodder head up and down in the vertical position, and then cylinders here and here that will keep the nodder head aligned in the basically the horizontal direction. So we're always keeping that nodder head exactly where we want it to be, regardless of what happens with the machine. So it's instantaneous feedback. So you hit a little pothole or the slope is a little different or anything like that, it's going to keep that trellis cable perfectly centered into that into the knotting mechanism. And then we added 1 additional cylinder here so that we could easily stow and deploy the entire nodder head for when you wanted to travel long distances. The other thing we noticed was in a lot of cases, you just don't have a lot of room at the end of rows to make the turns that you would like to make. And the unit itself could make those turns because we had four-wheel independent steering, but we couldn't make quite as tight a turns as we wanted to. And that was simply due to the mechanical design of the system. So we decided to swap out the tie rods and simply change them out with four-wheel independent hydraulics. So the hydraulic cylinder at each wheel now that'll control the position of the wheel. The other big issue we had with the tie rods was we needed a special type of bearing, and that bearing was only made in China, and it was getting difficult to get that bearing. And so basically, because we wanted the tighter radius to turn, the difficulty in getting the supply, those 2 issues by themselves basically told us to move into a different direction. And so it's really quite simple now. And in fact, we can get about a 15 or 20 degree better turn radius out of this machine than we could before. Now, so basically all the stuff I just showed you is all stuff that's going to be done and implemented by about the 15th of March when we're going to bring the machine back down to Olson Brothers and Oasis and start twining this year. But now I want to show you what the engineers have also been working on in terms of what we're going to be accomplishing between now and hopefully about October, November of this coming year. We're building this new staker head assembly. So obviously the machine itself not only has to tie knots on the top, which I think we demonstrated quite well, but we need to be able to stake that twine down to the ground. And so the engineers have designed this mechanism. It's very, very similar actually to a pneumatic nailer, which is kind of neat. We try never to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. So we try and steal things from other long established products that work quite well. So what we have here is a twine gripper. So this is an arm. When the nodder head brings the twine down into this position, the twine gripper swings around, grabs the twine, and brings it underneath the nodder head. A wire spool here feeds wire into the mechanism. The wire will get cut and then wrapped around the twine and then driven into the ground up to about a foot. This staker head moves down to the ground once the twine gripper has moved the twine into position. And as soon as that staker head hits the ground, the piston that drives the twine and the wire into the ground will fire to drive it down. Here it is in the lower position. It's, like I said, it's very similar to a pneumatic nailer. We've tested this in prototyping, and we see that we're using about a 40,000th diameter wire, so a fairly small diameter wire. We found that if we wrap that around the twine and drive it into the ground, we can generate a force of somewhere between 8 and 12 pounds of force that's needed to pull that twine out of the ground, which is comparable to using one of the current W clips. Here they are just kind of showing you side by side what they would look like. The other big advantage to this is that when you're, you don't have to worry too much about the height of the ground next to the unit. So, you know, if it's 6 inches higher or 6 inches lower, as this staker head swings down, as soon as it hits the ground, it's going to stake. So it doesn't really matter what the height of the ground is. And then here it is. I just wanted to give you a little bit better view of what the staker head actually looks like. So you have this twine positioning head. And like I said, it grabs the twine, spins it around. Basically, it's going to come at you like this and go through this position right here. And then the twine positioner will end up over here holding the twine. So the twine comes through the head, through this groove, and then back up. The wire spool is here. The wire feed mechanism is there. And in the next slide, so what happens is when the twine is underneath this, it'll be underneath this groove. The wire is fed through here. This wire forming punch forms it around the twine itself. And once it's formed around the twine, the punch head drives it into the ground. So a very simple mechanism, and it seems to work quite well in prototyping. We just have to finish up and finish up the full design at this point. So what are our next steps?
Kevin, sorry, just a reminder, we've got about 5 minutes left to go.
I'm just about done. So the next steps are we've ordered about 7,000 kilos, which is about 16,000 pounds of twine. It's going to be delivered by March 15th. We're going to be twining 100 acres at Olson Brothers. Thank you, Martin. And another 100 acres at Oasis Farm. So thank you, Brenton. These two guys agreed to basically buy the twine and pay us a little bit for our time to be down there to twine a couple hundred acres to get the system basically beat in and make sure it works the way we want it to. The plan is that our engineers will be down there for about the first week to get the kinks out and to train Olson Brothers and Oasis Farm employees on how to run the MAV. So after the first week or maybe 2 weeks of us working on the system and doing training, my engineers will step aside and simply stay there and watch how the system is running and assist as needed. But after that, the employees will start running the machine. That'll also help us understand how these guys work with the machine and any other modifications that we'll need to make. What we'll do is we'll let Ann and the guys, the rest of the team at the HOP Commission know, and they can send out a notice, and you'll all be invited to come down and watch what we're doing. So that's the end. Sorry the video didn't work as well as I would have liked it to, but I can always send you a copy of the video, and it's also posted online. So anyway, any questions?
Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions at this moment.
Okay.
Just a reminder to type it into the Q&A box. Oh, we have two. So the first question for you, Kevin, is what is the tensile strength of the twine?
The tensile strength is the stuff we're going to be using this year is 80 pound. And the reason we chose that is because our experience is that core twine at 100 pounds decomposes very quickly. 80 pound PLA twine is going to should be more than sufficient because it really doesn't lose any of its strength over the year. And you know, you put 3, 4, even 5 binds potentially on a twine, you're not getting more than about 45 pounds. So it's still 2x over what we would need. So that's the tensile strength is 80 pound. We can get it at 100 pounds. You can even get it higher than that if you wanted to.
Okay. So the next question is the one that came in following that was, how does the machine know not to stake the pole?
So basically what happens is there's a sensor on it. So it sees where the pole is. Every time we see a pole on the machine, it resets. So we know that we have to put a twine 1.75 feet from the pole, and then at every 3.5 feet after that. And so then it knows the next time it sees a pole, it resets itself. So we don't have a cumulative error going on. So it'll never hit a pole.
Okay, and then final question in our last minute here. Diane Gooding is asking about is a Twine dealer approved, GAP approved? Kevin, I know we've had some discussions about this with the commission, but just very briefly, can you touch on purchasing the Twine?
Yeah, so the Twine, you know, you can get the Twine, you know, this is a year from now, but Grower Supply will be distributing for us. So you can buy it from us or through Grower Supply. I've been working with Tom, and we've got some good plans in the future for how we can do this. Tom's got a lot of space to basically store it down there if you need it stored. We're hoping to get it just in time and have it delivered by a container. But and then your other question about, is it GAP approved? You know, I do not know if it's GAP approved in the US. I know they use it extensively in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, for greenhouses and things like that. I think it's been used in the US in greenhouses, but I don't know. I honestly don't know if it's GAP approved. And I don't know how you would even get it GAP approved. So it's something I can look at.
Okay. Well, we had one more question from Ben Coleman, but unfortunately it's time for the next seminar. So perhaps Ben and Kevin can connect on the chat to get that one discussed a little bit.